Alright guys, we're going to go through our chapter 4 section 3 notes on the cell and inheritance. This is just going briefly through how our sex cells are created and just kind of introducing the topic of meiosis. We will be getting into more with meiosis later next week. So let's begin. Alright, chromosomes and inheritance. So in 1903, Walter Sutton was an American geneticist who studied the cells of grasshoppers. He was looking at grasshoppers, seeing how they compared to other information about cells and inheritance. So Sutton wanted to know how sex cells formed and focused on the movement of chromosomes during the formation of the sex cells. If you remember during the cell cycle when we talked about mitosis, you know that chromosomes separate and they divide into two new cells, but those two cells get the exact same number and identical DNA and amount. So Sutton hypothesized that chromosomes were the key to understanding how offspring have traits similar to their parents. So Sutton observed that when the egg and the sperm joined together in fertilization, the fertilized egg had 24 chromosomes, just like the body cells, just the same amount. So this means that the grasshopper offspring has exactly the same number of chromosomes in its cells as did each of the parents. So the parent cells, like when they're fully cells, they had 24 chromosomes. So once fertilization happened, the fertilized egg had 24 chromosomes. So he determined that chromosomes existed in 12 pairs, and one chromosome in each pair came from the male parent, while the other chromosome came from the female parent. So based on this information, because of Gregor Mendel's work as well, Sutton also knew that alleles existed in pairs. So Sutton realized that paired alleles were carried on paired chromosomes, so they matched together. And this is considered the chromosome theory of inheritance. So those genes are carried from parent to their offspring on chromosome because of those alleles. So that is how you then get one part of the trait from your mom and one part from the dad. So meiosis then is this process by which the number of chromosomes is reduced by half to form sex cells, which are the sperm and the eggs. So during meiosis, the chromosome pairs separate and are distributed into two different cells. Then the resulting sex cells have only half as many chromosomes as the other cells in the organism. So any of our body cells all have the full amount of chromosomes we need, but our specific sex cells only have half. And through this process, we'll get into a little bit more. But meiosis is similar to mitosis because it follows the similar process of prophase, interphase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and things like that. But it repeats itself and goes through that process 2 times to help divide out the chromosomes. So each sex cell then ends up with only 2 chromosomes each. Each cell has 1 chromosome from each original pair. So again, 1 from the female parent and 1 from the male parent. So mitosis and Punnett squares, they do still go hand in hand, and kind of just like we were looking at how things could be predicted, we can do the same. So a Punnett square is actually a way to show the events that occur in meiosis. So when the chromosome pairs separate and go into 2 different sex cells, so do the alleles carried on each chromosome. So if you look at the picture, you can see the parent, and they each have a capital T and a lowercase t, so there's 2 different alleles. And then when you look at the possible egg cells and the possible sperm cells, they only get one of those alleles. So then when those cells combine through fertilization, you can see in that Punnett square the possible different outcomes based on those individual sex cells. So then with our genes, they are joined together and they are on each pair of chromosomes, similar to what beads on a string would look like. So they kind of sit in a certain place and they match up with each chromosome. This picture gives you a nice representation of it, just kind of showing you how those different genes match up on the chromosomes and how some of them can have those dominant or recessive alleles. So we only have 23 pairs of chromosomes in our body. 22 pairs are like cell chromosomes, body chromosomes, and then that 23rd pair is what's distinguished as our sex chromosomes that determine if we're male or female. Then our body cells each contain about 35,000 genes. And then each gene controls a trait. So that's what makes you so individual and unique, because there's so many different combinations of how those traits can appear and what those genes are. So then this is just a process of meiosis and mitosis. If you look at the top, that is an example of a skin cell going through the process of mitosis. So then think about taking that, and once you get those two identical cells, you go through the process again in meiosis. And as you can see, it starts to split, but then those chromosomes separate even further and even more individual. Once you guys are done with these notes, please make sure they are submitted and have a good day.